On March 11th, 1888, over 400 people would freeze to death across the American Northeast. Entire families trapped in tiny apartments with dwindling coal. 15,000 passengers stranded on frozen trains, some for days. Snow drifts so massive they swallowed three-story buildings whole. But inside those homes, in the flickering candlelight, families discovered something remarkable about what it takes to survive when the world outside wants to kill you. Here's how they actually slept through one of the most devastating storms in American history. Hey, if these stories help you sleep, subscribe. Drop your city and time below. I always check. Someone from Germany, someone from Texas, all here at once. Never gets old. Okay, so tonight we're heading back to 1888. But first, get comfortable. I mean it. Fix those pillows. Pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're gonna want to be cozy. Trust me on this one. Your eyes open to darkness. Not the gentle darkness of a country night with stars peeking through curtains. This is the thick, heavy darkness of a Manhattan tenement building in late winter. 5 stories of brick and desperation stacked on top of each other, and you're somewhere in the middle. The first thing you notice is the cold. It seeped through the thin walls while you slept, and now it's pressing against your face like a damp cloth. Your breath makes little clouds in front of you, barely visible in the grey light filtering through the frost-crusted window. You're not alone in this bed. 3 children are piled around you on a mattress stuffed with horsehair that's gone lumpy in all the wrong places. Your youngest, just 4 years old, is curled against your side with her thumb in her mouth. Your 2 boys, 7 and 9, are tangled together at the foot of the bed, their wool stockings still on because you never let them take those off in winter. The bed frame is iron, cold to the touch, but the feather tick beneath you holds some warmth. Barely. Your name is Helena Mueller. You're 32 years old. You came to America from Bavaria 7 years ago with your husband Friedrich, chasing the same dream that brought 12 million other immigrants through these streets. A better life, a chance, something more than the poverty you'd known in the old country. What you found instead was this, a 2-room apartment in a tenement on Orchard Street, 325 square feet for a family of 5. The kitchen has a coal-burning stove that doubles as your only heat source. The bedroom has this bed, a small dresser with a cracked mirror and pegs on the wall for hanging clothes. That's it. That's everything. But right now, on the morning of March 11th, 1888, you don't know what's coming. Nobody does. The Weather Bureau hasn't issued any warnings, the newspapers haven't printed any alerts. Meteorology in 1888 is basically just a guy looking at the sky and making his best guess. And his best guess today is wrong. You push yourself up carefully, trying not to wake the children. The floorboards are cold through your stockings as you pad toward the kitchen. The stove needs stoking. It always needs stoking. A single load of coal can burn for about 6 hours if you manage the dampers just right, but you've been sleeping for 8 and the fire has gone cold. You kneel in front of the stove, open the door and wince at the pile of ash inside. Coal dust coats everything in this apartment. Your hands, the walls, the food sometimes if you're not careful. It gets into your lungs and makes you cough in the night. But coal is life in a New York winter. Without it, you freeze. You reach for the coal scuttle. It's lighter than it should be. That's when you feel the first real tendril of worry curl through your chest. You're supposed to get more coal today. Friedrich was going to pick some up after work, but the scuttle is maybe a third full, and winters in New York are unpredictable. Still, the morning of March 11th is actually pleasant. You realise this as you get the fire started again and shuffle to the window to scrape away some of the frost. The street below is coming alive, merchants opening their shops, children heading to school, laughing, throwing snowballs from the dirty piles left over from last week's small storm, horse-drawn carriages clattering over cobblestones. It's mild for March, almost spring-like. The temperature feels like it might be in the 40s, which is practically balmy after the winter you've had. You allow yourself a small smile. Maybe today will be a good day. Behind you, the children are stirring. Little Greta calls for you in that sleepy voice that still makes your heart squeeze, even after 4 years. The boys are already arguing about something. The apartment fills with the sounds of morning, and you move through your routine like you've done 1,000 times before. Oatmeal on the stove, water from the pump in the hallway, shared with 20 other families on your floor. The line isn't too long this morning. Mrs. O'Brien from down the hall nods at you and mentions that her husband saw some snow in the forecast, maybe tonight. Snow. You shrug. Snow happens in March. You're not worried about snow. Here's the thing about the Great Blizzard of 1888 that makes it so terrifying. It wasn't just the snow, it wasn't just the wind, it was the complete and utter lack of warning combined with the arrogance of a city that thought it had conquered nature. New York in 1888 is the commercial and financial capital of America. Over 1 million people live crammed into Manhattan alone. The city has elevated trains, which they call the lifeblood of transportation. Telegraph lines stretch overhead like spider webs, connecting Wall Street to Boston to Chicago. Gas lamps light the streets at night. It's modern. It's powerful, it's the future, and it is completely, catastrophically unprepared for what's about to happen. High above the Atlantic Ocean, 2 massive weather systems are colliding. A warm front full of moisture is slamming into an Arctic air mass that's been building for days over Canada. The collision is creating something meteorologists in the future will study for generations. A bomb cyclone, they'll call it. A perfect storm. But on the morning of March 11th, nobody knows any of this. The Weather Bureau forecast for New York calls for partly cloudy skies with possible light rain. They're off by approximately everything. Friedrich leaves for work at 7 in the morning. He kisses your cheek, ruffles the boy's hair, pretends to steal Greta's nose, which makes her giggle. He works at a garment factory on the Lower East Side, about a 20-minute walk from your tenement. Sometimes he takes the elevated train if the weather is bad, but today seems nice enough for walking. You watch him go through the window, his broad shoulders disappearing into the crowd of workers heading toward the factories. He's a good man, your Friedrich. He works 6 days a week, 10 hours a day, and brings home enough money to keep you all fed and housed. Barely, but enough. The morning passes quickly. You do laundry in a massive pot on the stove. The steam fills the apartment, mixing with the smell of coal smoke and the onions you're frying for lunch. Greta plays with a doll made of rags. The boys have gone to school, Protestant Public School number 5, on East 4th Street, about 8 blocks away. By noon, you notice the first change. The light through the window has shifted. It's gotten darker, greyer, though it's only midday. You wipe your hands on your apron and press your face to the glass. The sky looks wrong. It's hard to explain, but there's a heaviness to it, a pressure. The clouds are thick and moving fast, rolling in from the west like an army advancing. You've lived through plenty of storms, but something about this feels different. At 2 in the afternoon, the rain starts. It comes down hard at first, soaking the streets, sending the merchants scrambling to cover their goods. People run for doorways and awnings. Within an hour, the temperature drops 10 degrees. The rain starts mixing with sleet. By 3:30, it's full snow, but not like any snow you've seen before. The flakes are tiny, almost like ice needles. They don't drift down gently the way snow usually does. They shoot sideways, driven by winds that seem to come from everywhere at once. Within minutes, you can barely see across the street. The boys should be home by now. School lets out at 3. Where are the boys? You go to the window again and again, pressing your face to the increasingly ice-covered glass. The streets are emptying fast. People are running, slipping, falling. The snow is already ankle-deep and accumulating faster than should be possible. Later, they'll calculate that it was falling at 4 inches per hour. At the time, all you know is that your children are out there somewhere. At 4:15, the door bangs open and your boys stumble in, covered head to toe in snow and ice. Their faces are red, their fingers stiff, and they're both crying. You've never seen them cry from weather before. They're tough kids, New York kids, but they're crying now. The teacher let them go at 3. They tell you between sobs the walk that usually takes 15 minutes took them over an hour. They couldn't see. They kept getting blown over. At one point, 9-year-old Wilhelm grabbed his brother's hand and they just stood there, lost, not knowing which way was home, until a man grabbed them both and pointed them down the right street. You strip off their wet clothes and wrap them in every blanket you can find. You put them by the stove, feed them hot soup, and try to stop your own hands from shaking. Friedrich is still out there. The storm is getting worse. The wind is howling now. A sound like nothing you've ever heard. It rattles the windows, shakes the walls. Snow is seeping through gaps in the window frame, piling up on the sill. You stuff rags into every crack you can find. By 6 o'clock, the sun has set, not that you could tell by looking outside. The world beyond your window is a wall of white. The gas street lamps, usually visible from your apartment, have disappeared. So has the building across the street. So has everything. Friedrich doesn't come home. The children are asking where Papa is. You tell them he's probably staying at the factory, which is safer than trying to walk home in this. You tell them he'll be fine. You tell them everything will be fine. You don't know if you believe it. The coal scuttle is getting lower. You've been feeding the stove all afternoon, trying to keep the apartment warm enough for the children to stop shivering. But you're already running through coal faster than planned, and Friedrich was supposed to bring more. At 8 o'clock, you make a decision. You pull the mattress off the bed frame and drag it into the kitchen, closer to the stove. You gather every blanket, every quilt, every piece of clothing that might provide warmth. You layer them on the mattress. The children are confused, but too tired to question it. You pile all 3 of them onto the mattress, then add yourself to the pile. Bodies pressed together, shared warmth. It's how your grandmother survived winters in Bavaria, and it's how you're going to survive this. Greta clings to you. The boys curl around each other like puppies. You pull the quilts up over all 4 of you, creating a cocoon of body heat and wool and desperation. The wind screams outside, the walls creak. Somewhere down the hall, a baby is crying, but here, under the blankets, with your children's breath warm against your neck, you wait. The stove crackles, the coal burns low. The longest night of your life is just beginning. Outside, across the northeastern United States, the temperature is still dropping. It will reach 6 degrees by morning. The wind is gusting to 80 miles per hour. Snowdrifts are already 10 feet high in some places and growing. Over 400 people will die in this storm. Dozens of them will freeze within steps of their own homes, unable to find their doors in the blinding white. Others will die trapped in train cars, on boats, in the streets. A senator named Roscoe Conkling will make the fatal decision to walk from Wall Street to Madison Square and die weeks later from the exposure. But Helena Mueller doesn't know any of this yet. She doesn't know that 15,000 people are stranded on the elevated trains right now, trapped in freezing cars that stopped moving hours ago. She doesn't know that her husband Friedrich is one of them. All she knows is that her children are warm for now, that she has maybe 12 hours of coal left if she's careful, that the storm is getting worse, and that somewhere in the howling darkness outside, her husband is trying to get home. Sleep doesn't come easy that night. Every gust of wind sounds like a warning. Every creak of the building sounds like it might be the whole structure coming apart. But exhaustion eventually wins, and Helena Mueller drifts into an uneasy rest with her children piled around her like small furnaces. Not like your bed right now, though. Soft and safe and warm. Nothing trying to kill you. Just the comfortable weight of your blankets, the gentle darkness of your room, the knowledge that you'll wake up to a world that isn't trying to freeze you solid. The Mueller family doesn't have that luxury. But they have each other, 4 hearts beating together on a horsehair mattress in a tenement kitchen, 4 bodies sharing whatever warmth they can generate, 4 people doing what humans have done since the beginning of time, surviving, together. The storm rages on, the night stretches long, and somewhere out there Friedrich Müller is gripping the sides of a frozen, elevated train car, waiting for morning, hoping his family is safe. He has no idea that the real fight is just beginning. All right, that's a good chunk. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Friedrich Müller can't feel his feet anymore. He's been standing in this elevated train car for 11 hours. 11 hours since the train ground to a halt somewhere around 53rd Street, the wheels spinning uselessly on tracks coated with ice. 11 hours since the conductor announced they'd be moving again any minute. That was a lie, and everyone knew it was a lie. But they believed it anyway because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. There are maybe 40 people crammed into this car, men mostly, heading home from work when the storm hit, a few women, one elderly man in the corner who stopped talking about 3 hours ago and now just stares at the frosted window with glassy eyes. Friedrich has been watching him. He keeps watching to make sure the man's chest is still moving. The car has no heat. Whatever warmth existed when they first stopped has long since bled out through the thin wooden walls. Snow has piled against the windows until they're almost completely blocked. The only light comes from a single oil lamp that someone thought to bring, and it's burning low. Friedrich stamps his feet. Nothing. He wiggles his toes inside his boots. Can't tell if they're moving or not. Frostbite starts slow, he knows. First you stop feeling, then the skin turns white, then grey, then black. Then the doctor takes a saw to whatever's left. He's seen men lose fingers in the factories, caught in machinery, crushed, mangled. He never thought he'd lose anything to weather. A man next to him, Irish by the sound of his accent, offers a flask. Friedrich takes it. Whiskey burns down his throat, spreads a moment of warmth through his chest. It's not real warmth, he knows. Alcohol actually makes you colder by pulling blood to your skin. But it feels good. And right now feeling good is in short supply. Wife at home? The Irishman asks. Friedrich nods. 3 children. The Irishman whistles low. Mine's got 4. Youngest is 2 months old. He takes the flask back, drinks deep. She'll be going out of her mind right now. Helena. Friedrich closes his eyes and pictures her face, the way she looked this morning when he left, tired but smiling. She's always tired. 3 children and a 2-room apartment and a husband who works 60 hours a week and still can't afford more than the basics. She deserves better. He promised her better back in Bavaria when he convinced her to leave everything she knew and cross an ocean for a dream. Some dream this turned out to be. The train car shudders. For one wild moment, Friedrich thinks they're moving, but no, it's just the wind slamming into them from the side, rocking the car on its frozen tracks. Someone screams. The elderly man in the corner doesn't react at all. "We gotta get off this thing," someone says. A young man, maybe 20, with the panicked eyes of someone who's never been truly cold before. "We gotta climb down." Climb down to what? Another voice answers. Can't see 10 feet in front of your face out there. Better than freezing to death up here. Is it though? The argument goes around and around. Friedrich stays quiet. He's thinking about the distance from here to Orchard Street. Maybe 2 miles. Maybe a little more. In normal weather, 40 minutes on foot. In this? He looks at the window, at the wall of white pressing against the glass, at the snow that's accumulated on the floor of the train car, blown in through gaps in the doors. No, he'd never make it. He'd be dead in a snowdrift before he got halfway. And then what happens to Helena? To Wilhelm, and Karl, and little Greta? He has to stay. He has to wait. Morning will come. The storm will break. They'll get home. That's what he tells himself. That's what everyone in this train car is telling themselves right now. It's the only thing keeping them from losing their minds completely. Around midnight, someone starts singing. An old hymn, something German that Friedrich's mother used to sing. He doesn't know who started it. Doesn't matter. One voice becomes 3, becomes 10, becomes the whole car, singing into the howling darkness outside. They don't sing well. Half of them don't even know the words, but they sing anyway, because singing means they're still alive, still breathing, still human beings, and not just frozen lumps of meat waiting to die. Friedrich sings too. He sings for Helena, for his children, for the morning that has to come eventually. It's the longest night of his life. Back on Orchard Street, Helena wakes to silence. Not real silence. The wind is still screaming outside, still throwing snow against the windows hard enough to rattle the glass, but there's a different kind of silence underneath it, a stillness in the building that wasn't there before. She realizes what it is. The baby down the hall has stopped crying. For one horrible moment she thinks the worst, but then she hears footsteps above her, the creak of floorboards, and she remembers that babies do eventually fall asleep, even in blizzards. The children are still piled around her on the mattress. Greta's face is pressed into Helena's shoulder. The boys have somehow migrated during the night and are now both curled against her back, their combined body heat almost uncomfortable. Almost, not quite. She extracts herself slowly, carefully, trying not to let in any cold air. The stove has gone out. She knew it would. The last of the coal went in around 2 in the morning, and she stayed awake, watching it burn down, knowing that when it was gone, things would get harder. The apartment is cold. Not freezing, not yet. The walls and the neighbours above and below provide some insulation, but cold enough that her breath makes clouds, cold enough that she can see ice crystals forming on the inside of the window. She wraps a blanket around her shoulders and shuffles to the stove, opens the door. Ash, just ash. The coal scuttle is empty. She checked it 3 times during the night, hoping somehow more would appear. It didn't. What now? She looks around the apartment. 2 rooms, a bed frame, a dresser, 2 wooden chairs, a small table, a crate that Friedrich uses as a footstool. The walls are bare except for a small crucifix and a picture of her mother, brought all the way from Bavaria. Furniture burns. She knows this. People have been burning furniture to survive since the first winter. It's just wood, just things. Things can be replaced. Can they, though, on Friedrich's wages? It took them 3 years to save for that bed frame. The table was a wedding gift. The chairs came from a street vendor, haggled down to almost nothing, still more than they could afford. She touches the back of one chair, runs her fingers over the grain. Thinks about how Wilhelm likes to sit in this one, swinging his legs while he does his sums. Thinks about Greta standing on it to help cook, reaching up to stir the pot. Then she thinks about her children freezing to death. She picks up the chair. It takes her 20 minutes to break it down into pieces small enough for the stove. She doesn't have an axe. She has a small knife for cooking and her own 2 hands. The chair fights back. She cuts her palm on a jagged edge, wraps it in a rag, keeps working. The children wake up to the sound of her destroying their furniture. "Mama?" Wilhelm's voice is confused, scared. "What are you doing?" "Making fire," she says. Doesn't stop, can't stop. If she stops, she'll start crying, and she can't do that in front of them. But that's our chair. Yes, Papa's going to be mad. Papa's going to be glad we're alive. Wilhelm goes quiet. He's 9, old enough to understand what she's not saying, old enough to look at the empty coal scuttle and the ice on the windows and put the pieces together. "Can I help?" he asks. She hands him the smaller pieces, shows him how to stack them in the stove. Carl and Greta watch from the mattress, blankets pulled up to their chins. The fire catches, the wood burns faster than coal, hotter but quicker. They'll need more. Helena looks at the second chair. By mid-morning, both chairs are gone. The table has lost 2 of its legs. The crate is nothing but ash. The apartment is warm enough to survive, but just barely, and she's already calculating how long the rest of the furniture will last. The bed frame is iron, won't burn. The dresser might give them a few hours. After that? She doesn't want to think about after that. Around noon, there's a knock at the door. Helena's heart leaps. Friedrich. It has to be Friedrich. She scrambles over the mattress, nearly trips on a blanket, throws open the door. It's not Friedrich, it's Mrs. O'Brien from down the hall. The woman looks like she hasn't slept in days. Her red hair is wild around her face, and she's clutching a shawl that's not nearly warm enough for this weather. "Do you have any coal?" Mrs. O'Brien asks. No greeting, no small talk, just desperation, raw and naked. "No." Helena shakes her head. "I'm burning the chairs." Something passes over Mrs. O'Brien's face. Understanding, kinship. "We're burning the dresser," she says. "The children's clothes were still in it. Had to dump them on the floor first." A laugh that's not really a laugh. "My Patrick would kill me if he knew, but Patrick's stuck somewhere on 6th Avenue. Been gone since yesterday, so..." They stand there for a moment, 2 women on opposite sides of a doorway, both missing their husbands, both watching their homes disappear piece by piece into stoves. "Come in," Helena says. "Bring your children. We can share the fire." Mrs. O'Brien's eyes fill with tears. "You don't have to do that. I know. It's not charity. It's survival. More bodies means more warmth. More children means more reason to keep the fire going. More people means someone to talk to, someone to share the weight of this with." 20 minutes later, Helena's apartment holds 8 people instead of 4. The O'Briens have 3 children, ages 2 to 8, plus a baby that Mrs. O'Brien has strapped to her chest. The baby's name is Margaret, and she's got the reddest hair Helena has ever seen. They pile everyone onto the mattress. Children in the middle, adults on the outside. It's crowded and loud and uncomfortable and absolutely necessary. "I was going to make soup," Helena says. "There's potatoes in the cupboard, onions, some dried beans from last week." "I have bread," Mrs. O'Brien offers. "Half a loaf. Stale, but bread." "Good, good." They pool their resources. It's not much. In a normal week, it would barely be a single day's meals for one family. But they're not getting through this normal week. They're getting through this 1 hour at a time. And right now, soup and stale bread feels like a feast. Helena sets the pot on the stove. The fire crackles. Outside, the wind howls, but in here, surrounded by children and neighbours and the smell of onions cooking, something shifts. "They're going to make it," She doesn't know how. She doesn't know what happens when the last stick of furniture burns down. She doesn't know where Friedrich is or if he's okay, but they're going to make it, because that's what you do. That's what people have always done. You burn the chairs. You share the soup. You hold your children close and you wait for the storm to pass. And somewhere out on the frozen elevated tracks, Friedrich Müller is climbing down a ladder. The young man from last night, the one who wanted to leave, finally convinced someone to try. Around dawn, when the wind died down just enough to see across the platform, two men pried open the doors and lowered themselves to the street using a rope made of belts and coat sleeves tied together. They made it. They actually made it. Word came back an hour later. There's a hotel 3 blocks south. They're taking people in. One by one, the passengers begin to leave. The elderly man in the corner refuses to move, says he'll wait for the trains to start running again. Friedrich argues with him, then gives up. Some people can't be saved from themselves. The descent is terrifying. The platform is 30 feet up. The makeshift rope only gets him halfway. He has to drop the rest, landing in a snowdrift that swallows him up to his chest. For a moment, buried in snow, Friedrich can't breathe, can't see, can't tell which way is up. Panic claws at his throat, then hands grab him. Other passengers already down, pulling him out. This way, someone shouts, "Follow the rope." There's a rope strung along the street, tied to lampposts, leading south toward the hotel. Friedrich grabs it and holds on, one foot in front of the other. The snow is up to his waist in some places. The wind tears at his clothes. His feet are completely numb now, but he's moving. After 11 hours of standing still, he's finally moving. The hotel is chaos. Bodies everywhere, packed into every room, every hallway, every corner. Rich men in suits lying on the same floor as factory workers. Women in furs next to women in rags. The blizzard has erased all the lines that usually separate people. In here, everyone's the same. Cold and scared and grateful to be alive. Friedrich finds a spot on the floor of what used to be a dining room. Someone hands him a cup of coffee. It's bitter and barely warm, but it's the best thing he's ever tasted. He thinks about Helena, about the children, about Orchard Street, still miles away, still impossible to reach. Morning, he'll try in the morning. The storm has to break eventually. It has to. Outside, the snow keeps falling, 4 inches an hour. The drifts are 20 feet high now and growing. Somewhere in the city, a man named Roscoe Conkling is making the decision to walk from Wall Street to Madison Square. He'll make it, barely, but the cold will settle into his bones, into his blood, into his brain. 6 weeks from now, he'll be dead. The blizzard doesn't care who you are, senator or immigrant, rich or poor. It takes what it wants, and it's not done taking yet. All right, that's section 2. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. March 13th, 1888, the 3rd day. The storm has been raging for over 36 hours now, and it shows no signs of stopping. The snow has buried streets so completely that the city looks like a different planet. A white planet. A dead planet. The drifts reach second-story windows in some neighbourhoods. In Herald Square, they're measuring them at 30 feet. 30 feet. Think about that for a second. Stack 3 cars on top of each other. That's how much snow is piled in the middle of Manhattan right now. And somewhere under all of it, the city is trying to survive. In the hotel where Friedrich Müller spent the night, things are getting tense. There are maybe 300 people crammed into a building designed for maybe 80 guests. The kitchens ran out of food around midnight. The coal supply is holding, barely, but the manager has started rationing it. 1 fire in the main lobby. That's it. Everyone else can freeze or crowd in. Friedrich woke up stiff and sore, his body aching from sleeping on a hard floor surrounded by strangers. His feet are swollen inside his boots. When he finally worked up the courage to look at them this morning, the skin was waxy and pale. Not black yet, not grey, but not good either. He needs to get home. The wind has died down some, not completely, but enough that he can see across the street now. The snow has stopped falling, at least for the moment. This might be his only chance. He pushes his way to the front door. A crowd of men has gathered there, all of them with the same idea: home, family, the desperate need to know. "You're mad," someone says. "It's still a mess out there." "My wife," Friedrich answers. "My children." The man goes quiet. Everyone goes quiet. They all have someone. They all have a reason. The door opens. Cold air rushes in, sharp as a knife. Friedrich steps out into a world he doesn't recognize. The street is gone. There's just snow, mountains of it, carved into strange shapes by the wind. Lampposts stick up at odd angles where they haven't been completely buried. A horse-drawn carriage sits abandoned in the middle of what used to be Broadway, snow packed around it up to the roof. The horse is nowhere to be seen. Friedrich doesn't want to think about what happened to the horse. He starts walking. If you can call it walking, it's more like swimming, really. Swimming through snow that comes up to his waist, sometimes his chest. Every step is a battle. His feet scream at him with every movement, pins and needles that have graduated to full-on fire. Good. Fire means they're not dead yet. He makes it 2 blocks before he has to stop. His lungs are burning, his legs are shaking, the cold is seeping through his coat, through his clothes, through his skin. He can see his breath in thick clouds, and ice is forming on his moustache. 2 miles to Orchard Street. At this rate, it'll take him hours, if he makes it at all. He keeps going. Back on Orchard Street, Helena and Mrs. O'Brien have developed a system. They take turns sleeping. One woman stays awake to tend the fire, while the other rests with the children. Every 2 hours they switch. It's not much sleep, but it's better than nothing, and it keeps someone alert in case the fire goes out or something goes wrong. The children have adjusted faster than Helena expected. Kids are adaptable that way. Wilhelm and the O'Brien boy, Patrick Jr., have become fast friends over the past day. They've built a fort out of blankets in the corner and are currently engaged in some elaborate game involving imaginary pirates and treasure. Little Greta is teaching the O'Briens' 2-year-old how to play pat a cake. The baby, Margaret, sleeps most of the time, which Mrs. O'Brien says is normal for newborns. Helena isn't sure if that's true, or if the woman is just trying to convince herself. The dresser is gone now, burned piece by piece through the night. What's left of the table is propped against the wall, missing all 4 legs. The apartment looks ransacked, stripped of anything that might burn. Helena's mother's picture is still on the wall. She won't burn that. She'll die before she burns that. "What's it like in Ireland?" Wilhelm asks suddenly, poking his head out of the blanket fort. Mrs. O'Brien looks up from the sock she's been darning. "Cold," she says. "Green. Lots of rain." "Is there snow?" "Sometimes. Not like this, though. Never like this." "Why did you leave?" Mrs. O'Brien's hands go still on the sock. Helena watches the woman's face carefully. There's a story there. There's always a story. "There was nothing to eat," Mrs. O'Brien says finally. "The potatoes died. All of them. We ate grass. We ate dirt. We ate things I don't want to tell you about." She pauses. "My mother died. My sisters. My baby brother. So we left. My father and me. We got on a boat and we came here." Wilhelm is quiet for a moment. "Did you find food here?" "Yes. Not always enough, but enough to live on." "That's good. That's good," Mrs. O'Brien agrees. She goes back to darning. Helena pretends she doesn't see the tears running down the woman's cheeks. This is what it comes down to, Helena thinks. This is what America is. People running from something terrible, hoping to find something better. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Either way, they keep running. She thinks about Friedrich out there somewhere in the snow, running toward them. Please be running toward them. Meanwhile, about 1,000 miles to the west, in the Dakota Territory, the snow has been falling for 2 days straight. This is a different blizzard, the one they're calling the Children's Blizzard, or the Schoolhouse Blizzard, or sometimes just the storm. It hit the Great Plains on January 12th, 2 months before the one currently burying New York. But for the families who survived it, the memories are still fresh, the wounds are still open. Anna Olson is 13 years old. She lives on a farm outside of what will eventually become South Dakota, in a sod house that her father built with his own 2 hands. The walls are made of prairie grass and dirt, packed tight and plastered smooth on the inside. In summer, wildflowers sometimes grow on the roof. It's not summer now. Anna is the oldest of 5 children. Her mother died 3 years ago, giving birth to the youngest, a boy named Eric, who has never known anything but this harsh prairie life. Her father does his best, but he's gone most days, working the fields in summer or hiring himself out to other farms in winter. That leaves Anna in charge. She's been in charge since she was 10. She's tired. The morning of January 12th started warm, warmer than it had been in weeks. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and Anna's father decided it was safe to send the children to school. School is 3 miles away, a one-room building with a coal stove and a teacher who's barely older than Anna herself. Miss Jensen, 20 years old, from Minnesota. She'd never seen a plains blizzard before that day. The 5 Olsen children set out that morning in good spirits. Anna carried baby Eric on her back in a sling. Her brother Lars, 11, carried their lunch pail. The younger 3 walked in a line behind them, ages 9, 7 and 5. They laughed. They threw snowballs at each other from the old snow piles. They had no idea what was coming. The storm hit around noon. Anna will never forget the sound. A roar, like a train, but deeper, louder, coming from everywhere at once. She looked up and saw a wall of blackness rolling across the prairie, moving faster than anything she'd ever seen. "Run!" she screamed. "Run for the school!" They ran. The 3 little ones couldn't keep up. Anna grabbed the 7-year-old under her arm, still carrying Eric on her back. Lars took the 5-year-old on his shoulders. The 9-year-old, a girl named Ingrid, ran beside them, her face white with terror. The wall hit them before they reached the school. One moment they could see, the next moment nothing, just white, white and cold, and a wind that knocked them off their feet, that drove ice into their eyes and mouths and lungs. Anna couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't hear anything but the roar of the storm. She grabbed Ingrid's hand, grabbed Lars, pulled them close. The smaller children were crying, their voices swallowed by the wind. "This way," she screamed. "Follow me." She didn't know which way the school was. She couldn't see it, couldn't see anything, but she picked a direction and started walking, dragging her siblings behind her, and by some miracle, some grace, some luck she still doesn't understand, she walked straight into the side of the schoolhouse. They fell through the door, all 6 of them covered in ice and gasping for air. Miss Jensen slammed the door behind them and shoved a desk against it to keep the wind from ripping it open again. Inside, there were 17 students, ages 5 to 15. The oldest was Anna. Outside, the temperature was dropping. It would reach 40 below zero by nightfall. The coal stove in the corner had maybe 6 hours of fuel left, and that's when Miss Jensen looked at Anna with eyes full of fear and said, "What do we do?" Anna didn't know. She was 13. She was scared. She had a baby brother strapped to her back and 4 other siblings counting on her. She was supposed to be in school learning arithmetic and spelling, not making life or death decisions in a one-room building while the world outside tried to kill them. But there was no one else. Miss Jensen was frozen with panic. The other children were crying. Someone had to do something. Anna looked around the room. Desks, chairs, books, an American flag in the corner, hanging limp, the coal bin by the stove, half empty. "We burn the desks," she said. Her voice came out steady somehow, calmer than she felt. "After the coal's gone, we burn everything." Miss Jensen stared at her. "The school property, the superintendent. The superintendent isn't here." Anna started pulling books off the shelf. "Help me gather these. Paper burns fast, but it'll help us start fires." The other children watched. Some of them stopped crying. Having something to do, something concrete, seemed to help. Lars started breaking apart a desk with his bare hands. The 9-year-old, Ingrid, collected smaller pieces of wood for kindling. They worked, they planned, they rationed what little food they had. 1 bite of bread per person, 1 sip of water from the pump. When the sun went down and the temperature plummeted, Anna organised sleeping arrangements. All 17 children plus Miss Jensen piled together on the floor near the stove, bodies pressed close, warmth shared. "I'm cold," the 5-year-old whimpered. His name was Peter. He was small for his age, always getting sick. "I know," Anna said. She pulled him closer, wrapped herself around him. "We're all cold, but we're together, and tomorrow the sun will come up and we'll be okay." She didn't know if that was true. None of them knew. But saying it out loud seemed to help, so she kept saying it over and over through the long frozen night. "Tomorrow the sun will come up and we'll be okay." The sun did come up. Anna saw it through the frost-covered windows. A pale disk struggling through the clouds. The storm was still raging, but the light was there. That meant something. They burned 3 desks that night, 2 more the next day. The books lasted longer than Anna expected. Miss Jensen cried when they threw her favourite poetry collection into the flames. "I'll buy you a new one," Anna said. "When this is over, with what money? I'll find some." The teacher laughed. It was a crazy laugh, the kind that comes when you've been scared too long and your brain can't handle it anymore. But she stopped crying. That was something. On the 3rd day, the storm finally broke. Anna opened the door and looked out at a world transformed. Snow everywhere, as far as she could see. Drifts taller than the schoolhouse in some places. The prairie that she'd known her whole life was gone, replaced by something alien and white and impossibly still. But there was sunlight, real sunlight. And somewhere out there, her father was coming to find them. She knew he was. She had to believe he was. "Everyone stay inside," she said. "Help is coming." It took her father 6 hours to reach the school. He dug through drifts with his bare hands for the last half-mile. When he finally broke through the door, his face was raw and bleeding, his fingers black with frostbite. He didn't care about any of that. He just gathered his children in his arms and wept. All 5 Olsen children survived that storm. So did everyone else in that schoolhouse. Miss Jensen later called it a miracle. Anna called it stubbornness. Not everyone was so lucky. Across the prairie that week, over 200 people died. Many of them children. Many of them teachers who made the wrong decision, who let their students go home too early, who didn't burn the furniture in time. Anna learned something in that schoolhouse, something about leadership, about making hard choices when everyone else is too scared to think, about doing whatever it takes to keep the people you love alive. She was 13 years old. She grew up fast that week. Back in New York, Friedrich Müller is still fighting his way through the snow. He's made it about a mile now. A mile in 3 hours. His body is screaming at him to stop, to rest, to find shelter and wait for someone else to dig the city out. But every time he thinks about stopping, he sees Helena's face, sees his children, so he keeps moving. The streets are starting to fill with other people now, men mostly doing the same thing he's doing, fighting their way home. Some have shovels, some have nothing but their hands. They don't talk much, takes too much energy. They just nod at each other and keep digging. In one spot, a group of men has formed a human chain passing through a snowdrift that blocks the entire street. Friedrich joins them, waits his turn, climbs through the tunnel they've carved, emerging on the other side, covered in snow but still breathing. 1 mile to go. The sun is setting now, and the temperature is dropping again. If he doesn't make it home before dark, he might not make it at all. He pushes harder, ignores the pain in his feet, the burning in his lungs, the voice in his head telling him to give up. He's not giving up. Not today. Orchard Street appears through the snow like a mirage. He almost doesn't believe it at first. But no, there it is, the tenement building, half buried in white. He stumbles toward it, falls, gets up, falls again, crawls the last few feet on his hands and knees. The front door is blocked by a drift 4 feet high. He digs with his bare hands, tearing at the snow, not caring about the cold anymore. The door opens, he falls through it, he's home. Now he just has to climb 5 flights of stairs. Alright, that's section 3. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. The stairs are dark, no gas lamps working. The storm knocked out most of the city's power lines somewhere around midnight on the first day, and nobody's been able to fix them since. Friedrich pulls himself up by the railing. His legs don't want to work anymore. His feet are blocks of ice at the end of his ankles, more burden than body part. But he climbs, 1 step at a time, counting them in his head like a prayer. 1, 2, 3. The building is quiet, too quiet. Usually you can hear everything in a tenement. Babies crying, couples arguing, children playing. The walls are thin as paper, and privacy is a luxury nobody can afford. But right now, nothing. Just the creak of the stairs under his weight and the distant howl of wind outside. 4, 5, 6. He passes the 2nd floor, sees a door hanging open, the apartment beyond it dark and still, calls out, no answer, keeps climbing. 3rd floor, 4th floor. His lungs are burning now. His heart is hammering so hard he can hear it in his ears. The cold has seeped into his bones and he can't stop shaking. 5th floor. There's light coming from under the door. A flickering orange glow. Fire. Someone has a fire going. He reaches for the door handle. Misses. His fingers won't cooperate. Tries again. Gets it. The door swings open, and there she is. Helena is standing by the stove, stirring something in a pot. She looks up at the sound, and for a moment she just stares at him, like she's seeing a ghost, like she can't believe he's real. Then she screams. Not a scared scream, a joyful scream, a scream of relief so pure it doesn't even sound human. She drops the spoon and runs toward him, slamming into his chest hard enough to knock him backward. Friedrich, Friedrich, Friedrich. She says his name over and over, like a spell, like saying it enough times will make this moment permanent. Her arms are around him, squeezing so tight he can barely breathe. He doesn't care. He squeezes back. Papa! The children come flying off the mattress. Wilhelm and Karl crash into his legs. Little Greta grabs his coat and won't let go. They're all talking at once, all crying, all trying to touch him at the same time. Friedrich sinks to his knees, gathers them all in his arms, feels their warmth, their life, their realness. He's home. He made it. Your feet, Helena says suddenly. She's looking down at the trail of water he's left across the floor. His boots are soaked through, the leather dark and ruined. Friedrich! Your feet! I can't feel them. Her face goes pale. Sit down, by the stove, now. She pushes him toward the fire, starts working at his bootlaces with shaking hands. The laces are frozen solid. She has to cut them with a knife. The boots come off, then the socks, stiff with ice. Friedrich looks down at his feet and feels his stomach drop. They're white, not pink, not red, not any healthy colour. White as candle wax, except for the toes, which have started turning grey at the tips. Snow, Helena says. We need snow. Mrs. O'Brien is there suddenly, handing over a bowl of fresh snow from the windowsill. Helena starts rubbing it gently into Friedrich's feet, the old remedy for frostbite. Warm them slowly. Too fast and the tissue dies. It hurts. God, it hurts. As feeling starts to return, it comes with fire. Pins and needles that feel like actual pins and actual needles being driven into his flesh. Friedrich grits his teeth and doesn't scream. The children are watching. This is Mrs. O'Brien, Helena says as she works. From down the hall, her family's been staying with us. Friedrich looks up, sees the Irish woman and her children huddled on the mattress, watching him with wide eyes, sees the baby in her arms, sees the stripped apartment, the missing furniture, the bare walls. Thank you, he says. His voice comes out rough. For taking care of them. They took care of us, Mrs. O'Brien says. Your wife's the reason we're alive. Helena doesn't look up from his feet. The reason we're all alive is luck and stubbornness and burning the chairs. Friedrich looks around again, notices what's missing, the chairs, the table, the crate he used to rest his feet on after long days at the factory. You burned the furniture? Yes. Good. She looks up at him then, surprised. Maybe expecting him to be angry. Good, he says again. Furniture we can replace. You and the children, I can't replace. She starts crying, quiet tears that roll down her cheeks as she keeps rubbing snow into his ruined feet. He reaches down and touches her face. We made it, he says. We're okay, she repeats. And for the first time since the storm started, she sounds like she believes it. The night passes slowly. Friedrich's feet throb with returning circulation. The grey at his toes fades to pink, which Helena says is a good sign. He might lose a nail or two, but he'll probably keep all his toes. Probably. They sleep piled together on the mattress. Both families, 10 people in all, arranged like sardines on a surface meant for 2. It's uncomfortable and crowded and smells like unwashed bodies and onion soup. It's also the safest Friedrich has felt in 3 days. Outside, the wind has finally died down. The snow has stopped falling. Tomorrow they'll start digging out. Tomorrow the city will begin the long process of coming back to life. But that's tomorrow. Tonight they rest. Meanwhile, back on the prairie, the stories are still being collected. Stories of survival and loss. Stories that will be passed down through generations. There's the story of Seymour Dopp, a teacher in Pawnee City, Nebraska. When the storm hit, he had 17 students in his care. He looked out the window, saw that wall of white coming, and made a decision. Nobody leaves. They stayed in that schoolhouse for 18 hours. Dopp kept the fire going all night, burning through their entire supply of coal and then starting on the woodpile outside. He sent the older boys out in pairs, tied together with rope, to bring in more fuel. They could only go 10 feet from the door before the rope ran out, but they kept going, kept bringing in whatever they could find. When the coal ran out, they burned desks. When the desks ran out, they burned books. When the books ran out, they burned the wooden shutters from the windows. Morning came. The storm kept raging. Dopp's students were hungry, scared, cold despite the fire. Some of the younger ones were crying. He gathered them together and started telling stories, made up adventures about brave pioneers and magical horses and kingdoms made of ice, kept them distracted, kept them calm. The storm finally broke on the second afternoon. Parents started arriving, wading through 5-foot drifts, faces red and raw from the cold. They'd been walking for hours. Some of them had been walking all night. Every single one of DOP's 17 students went home alive. Then there's the story of Etta Shattuck. Etta was 19 years old, a teacher at a small school in Seward County, Nebraska. When the storm hit, she wasn't at school. She'd dismissed class early because of a family emergency and was walking home along the main road. The wall of white caught her in the open. She couldn't see, couldn't hear, couldn't tell which way was forward. She stumbled through the snow for what felt like hours, getting colder and more lost with every step. Then she found a haystack. Not much of a shelter, just a pile of dried grass that farmers used for feeding livestock. But it was something. She burrowed into it, pulling hay around her body, creating a pocket of warmth in the frozen chaos. She stayed in that haystack for 3 days. 3 days, 72 hours, buried in hay while the storm raged around her, while temperatures dropped to 40 below, while people died in the streets just miles away. She ate snow for water. She didn't eat anything else. She slept when she could and stayed awake when she couldn't, talking to herself to keep from going crazy. On the 3rd day, a farmer named Daniel Murphy was out checking his property. He saw something strange in the haystack. A hand poking out of the hay, waving weakly. He pulled Etta out. She was alive, barely. Her feet and legs were badly frostbitten. The doctors tried to save them, but in the end, both feet had to go. Etta Shattuck lived to be an old woman. She never walked again, but she never stopped teaching either. She spent the rest of her life in a wheelchair in front of a classroom, telling her students about the storm that took her legs but not her spirit. Some people break in moments like that. Some people become something stronger. And then there's the story that nobody likes to tell, the one about Lois Royce. Lois was a teacher too, young, dedicated, new to the prairie. When the storm hit, she had 3 students left in her schoolhouse. The others had gone home early. She should have kept them all. The building was small, poorly insulated. By 3 in the afternoon, they'd run out of coal. Lois looked at her 3 students, ages 6, 9, and 9, looked at the storm outside, made a calculation. Her boarding house was 82 yards away. She could see it sometimes when the wind shifted. 82 yards, that's less than a football field. She could make it. They could all make it. She bundled the children up, took the smallest one in her arms, told the other 2 to hold hands and follow her. They left the schoolhouse. The storm swallowed them instantly. Lois couldn't see the boarding house. Couldn't see anything. She picked a direction and walked, dragging the children behind her. They walked and walked and walked, getting colder, getting weaker, getting more lost with every step. They never found the boarding house. When the storm broke 2 days later, searchers found all 4 of them in a snowdrift, less than 50 yards from the school. They'd walked in a circle. The children were dead, frozen in the positions they'd fallen. Lois was barely alive. She lost both feet to frostbite, lost them the same way Etta Shattuck did. But unlike Etta, Lois never recovered. Not really. She spent the rest of her life haunted by those 3 children, by the decision she'd made, by the 82 yards that might as well have been 82 miles. Not every story from that storm has a happy ending. Not every hero survives. Sometimes you make the right call and live. Sometimes you make the wrong call and die. Sometimes there is no right call, just impossible choices and terrible luck. The prairie taught people that. It taught them hard. Back in New York, dawn is breaking over a city buried in white. Friedrich wakes to the sound of shovels. Lots of shovels. He limps to the window, favouring his damaged feet, and looks out at a scene he'll never forget. People are digging, hundreds of them. thousands, maybe. Every able-bodied person in the city seems to be out there attacking the snow with whatever they have. Shovels, boards, their bare hands. They're forming lines, passing snow from hand to hand, trying to clear paths through the drifts. It's chaos. It's beautiful. "We should help," Helena says from behind him. Friedrich turns, looks at her face, tired but determined, looks at the children still sleeping on the mattress, looks at Mrs. O'Brien already pulling on her coat. "Your husband," Friedrich says. "Patrick, he's still out there somewhere." Mrs. O'Brien nods. Her jaw is set tight. "I know, I'm going to find him." They go together. Friedrich, Helena, Mrs. O'Brien. They leave the children with the oldest O'Brien boy, 8 years old, and suddenly very serious. They join the crowds in the street, the mass of humanity trying to dig their city back from the snow. The work is hard, brutal even. Friedrich's feet scream at him with every step. Helena's hands crack and bleed in the cold. Mrs. O'Brien pushes herself until she's gasping, then pushes herself some more. But they're not alone. Nobody is alone today. The blizzard erased all the usual lines, rich and poor, native and immigrant, Irish and German and Italian and everyone else. They're all just people now, people with shovels. Around noon, Mrs. O'Brien finds her husband. Patrick O'Brien is stumbling down what used to be 6th Avenue, supported by 2 strangers who found him collapsed in a doorway 3 blocks away. He's alive, frostbitten, exhausted, half delirious with cold and hunger, but alive. Mrs. O'Brien runs to him, throws her arms around him, cries into his chest while he strokes her hair and murmurs words that Friedrich can't hear. Another family reunited, another small victory against the storm. Friedrich looks at Helena. She's watching the O'Briens with tears in her eyes. "We made it," she says softly. "We made it," he agrees. The city is still buried. The death toll is still climbing. It will be days before the trains run again, weeks before life returns to anything resembling normal. There will be funerals, there will be grief, there will be a reckoning for the infrastructure that failed and the warnings that never came. But right now, in this moment, none of that matters. Right now, there's just the sun on the snow, the sound of shovels, 2 families who found their way back to each other, and the slow, stubborn process of digging out. Not so different from your life, really. The storms come, they always come. Maybe not blizzards, maybe money troubles, or health scares, or relationships falling apart, but storms all the same. And when they hit, you do what Helena did, what Friedrich did, what those prairie teachers did with their students. You burn the chairs if you have to. You huddle together for warmth. You keep the fire going through the long night and trust that morning will come. It always does, eventually. Your bed right now, soft and warm and safe, is the morning after someone else's storm. Every comfort you have was built by people who survived something, who dug themselves out of the snow, literally or otherwise, and kept going. That's the thing about humans. We keep going, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when the wind is howling and the cold is seeping in and we can't feel our feet anymore. We just keep going. Alright, that's section 4. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. The digging took days. Not hours, not a single heroic afternoon of shoveling. Days. The snow was too deep, the drifts too massive, the city too unprepared. There were no snowplows in 1888, not the kind we have now anyway. Just men with shovels and horses with scrapers, fighting against 20 million tons of frozen white. The city hired everyone who could hold a shovel. Immigrants fresh off the boat, factory workers with no factories to work in, street vendors with no streets to vend on. They paid $1.50 a day, which was decent money, and the lines stretched around the block. People needed work. People needed to eat, and the snow wasn't going to move itself. Friedrich went back out on the second day. His feet were still swollen, still painful, but he could walk if he was careful. Helena didn't want him to go. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and her jaw set, looking at him with that expression she got when she was about to put her foot down. "The children need food," Friedrich said. "The coal man can't get through until the streets are clear. $1.50 a day buys us another week." She didn't argue after that. She just handed him his coat and told him to come home before dark. He joined a crew clearing Broadway, worked shoulder to shoulder with men he'd never met and would probably never see again. They didn't talk much, too tired to talk, just the rhythm of the shovel, the grunt of exertion, the slow satisfaction of watching the street reappear inch by inch. By the end of the first day, they'd cleared maybe 100 feet. 100 feet in 10 hours. At that rate, it would take months to dig out the whole city, but they kept going. What else was there to do? The hotels became something strange during those days. Makeshift shelters, impromptu communities, places where the normal rules didn't apply. The Astor House on Broadway was packed with refugees, rich people mostly, the kind who could afford to be staying at the Astor in the first place. But when the storm hit and nobody could leave, the staff started letting in anyone who needed shelter. Suddenly you had bankers sleeping on cots next to cab drivers, society ladies sharing blankets with seamstresses. The blizzard didn't care about your bank account, and neither did the cold. They ran out of food on the second day. The kitchens had enough supplies for maybe 100 guests, not the 300 who ended up crammed inside. The manager sent runners out to nearby shops, but most of the shops were buried. In the end, they stretched what they had. Thin soup, stale bread. Coffee that got weaker and weaker as the supply dwindled. Nobody complained. How could you complain? You were alive. You were warm. That was more than a lot of people had. Mark Twain was one of the guests at the Astor that week. The famous writer had come to New York from Hartford for some business meeting or another, and the storm caught him just like it caught everyone else. He spent 3 days trapped in that hotel, sleeping on a cot in the hallway, eating watered-down soup, watching the snow pile higher and higher outside his window. He sent a telegram to his wife back in Connecticut, just one line, because the telegraph was barely working and messages were being rationed. "I am marooned in a desert hotel," he wrote. That was Twain. Even in disaster, he found the joke. Even buried in snow, he was thinking about the story he'd tell later. Years later, he'd write about that week, about the strange democracy of the blizzard, the way it stripped away all the usual pretenses, about the man in the top hat sharing his last cigar with the man in the threadbare coat, about the woman who gave up her private room so a family with children could have somewhere warm to sleep. "I have seen the best of human nature," he wrote, "and I saw it in the worst of weather." That was true for a lot of people that week. The blizzard brought out something in folks. Not always good things. There were looters, sure, people who took advantage of the chaos to break into abandoned shops and help themselves. There were price gougers who charged $5 for a loaf of bread and $10 for a bucket of coal. But mostly, people were decent. Mostly, they helped each other. Mostly, they remembered that we're all in this together, especially when the storm is trying to kill us all equally. The O'Briens went back to their own apartment on the third day. Patrick's frostbite wasn't as bad as Friedrich's. Just some damage to his fingers that would heal with time. They hugged Helena at the door, promised to visit, said things that neighbours say when they've been through something terrible together. "You saved my family," Mrs. O'Brien said. Her voice was thick. "I won't forget that." "You would have done the same," Helena answered. "Maybe, but you did it first." The apartment felt empty after they left, too quiet. The Muller children had gotten used to having playmates around. And now they wandered the stripped rooms looking lost. No chairs to sit on. No table to eat at. Just the mattress on the floor and the iron bed frame in the bedroom, useless without its legs. "We'll rebuild," Friedrich said that night. They were eating soup straight from the pot, passing it back and forth because they'd burned the bowls. "Soon as the street's clear and I can get back to work, we'll buy new furniture, better furniture." Helena nodded. She didn't say what they were both thinking, that it would take months to save enough, that winter wasn't over yet, that they'd burned 3 years of careful savings in 3 days of survival. But they were alive. The children were alive. In the end, that was all that mattered. Across the city, similar conversations were happening. Families taking stock of what they'd lost, what they'd kept, what they'd have to do to start over. The storm had taken so much: money, property, lives. But it had given something too. A reminder of what was important. A chance to see what people were really made of. The bodies started appearing on the 4th day. As the snow melted and the drifts were cleared, the searchers found them. Men and women who'd been caught in the open, children who'd gotten lost trying to get home, horses frozen where they stood, still harnessed to carriages that had become coffins. In one drift on 3rd Avenue, they found a man in an expensive suit, his hand still reaching toward a door that was only 10 feet away. He'd been so close to safety, but the cold had taken him anyway. His name was George Barrymore. He was a merchant from the financial district. He'd tried to walk home when the elevated trains stopped running, just like Friedrich had, but he'd collapsed in a snowbank 4 blocks from his house, and nobody found him until it was too late. There were dozens of stories like that. Hundreds, eventually. People who made the wrong choice, or the right choice at the wrong moment, or no choice at all. The storm didn't discriminate. It took the rich and the poor, the young and the old, the brave and the frightened. 200 people died in New York City alone. 400 across the whole Northeast. The final count would never be exact. Too many bodies in too many places, too much chaos to keep proper records. The funerals started on the 5th day, small services mostly, private, families gathering in churches that were half buried in snow, saying goodbye to the people they'd lost. The priests and rabbis and ministers worked overtime that week, offering comfort where they could, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Helena went to one funeral. A woman from her building, old Mrs. Kowalski on the 2nd floor. She'd lived alone since her husband died, and when the storm hit, she didn't have anyone to check on her. They found her in her apartment on the 3rd day, frozen in a chair by the window, wrapped in every blanket she owned. It wasn't enough. The blankets, the window, the thin walls of the tenement, none of it was enough. Helena stood in the back of the church and cried. She cried for Mrs. Kowalski, who'd always given the children candy on holidays. She cried for all the people she didn't know, the names in the newspaper that kept getting longer. She cried for herself, for the fear she'd felt during those 3 days, for how close she'd come to being one of those names. Friedrich found her there, put his arm around her, didn't say anything. What was there to say? They walked home together through streets that were finally starting to clear. The snow was turning grey now, mixing with the dirt and garbage that always covered New York. The city was waking up, shops were opening, people were getting back to work, life was going on, because that's what life does. "I want to write to my sister," Helena said suddenly. Friedrich looked at her. "In Bavaria?" "Yes. I want to tell her what happened. I want her to know we're okay." He nodded. Paper and ink would cost money they didn't have, and postage to Europe wasn't cheap, but some things were worth the expense. "Tell her about the chairs," he said. "Tell her how you saved the children." Helena shook her head. "I'll tell her we survived. That's enough." But it wasn't, really. It would never be enough to capture what those 3 days had been like. The fear and the cold and the desperate burning of furniture. The way strangers became family when the storm was howling outside. The moment Friedrich walked through the door, alive, and she'd felt something break loose in her chest that she hadn't even known was clenched tight. Some things you can't put in a letter. Some things you just have to carry. They climbed the stairs to their apartment. The children were waiting, hungry and restless and alive. Helena started cooking dinner. Friedrich sat on the mattress and watched her, his damaged feet propped up on a pillow. Outside, the sun was setting over a city that was slowly remembering how to function. The trains would run again tomorrow, they said. The telegraph lines were almost fixed. Wall Street was planning to reopen by the end of the week. Normal life was coming back, and the Müller family would be there to meet it, together. The children were already settling into their new routine. No chairs meant sitting on the floor, no table meant eating wherever you could find a flat surface. Wilhelm had turned it into a game, pretending they were pioneers camping in the wilderness. Karl went along with it because he went along with everything Wilhelm did. And Greta, sweet little Greta, had decided that sleeping on the mattress in the kitchen was actually better than the bedroom because she could watch the fire. Kids adapt. That's one of the beautiful things about them. They don't hold on to the way things were the same way adults do. They just accept the way things are and keep moving. Helena watched them eating their soup cross-legged on the floor and felt something warm spread through her chest. Pride, maybe, or gratitude, or just love, simple and overwhelming. They'd made it. Against all odds, against the worst storm anyone had ever seen, they'd made it. The night was quiet. The wind had finally stopped, truly stopped, for the first time in days. Through the window, Helena could see stars, actual stars, bright and cold in the winter sky. She couldn't remember the last time she'd noticed the stars. "Friedrich," she said softly. He looked up from the mattress where he was helping Karl practice his letters with a piece of charcoal and a scrap of newspaper. "Look." He limped to the window, stood beside her, looked up at the sky. "Stars," he said. "Stars." They stood there for a long moment, not talking, just looking. Two immigrants in a stripped apartment in a battered city, watching the same stars that people had watched for thousands of years, the same stars that their parents had watched in Bavaria and their grandparents before them. Some things don't change. The storms come and go. The snow falls and melts, but the stars stay where they are, steady and patient and eternal. "Do you think it's over?" Helena asked. "The storm?" Friedrich considered the question. "This one, yes, but there will be others. I know. We'll survive those too." She leaned against him, felt his arm go around her shoulders, felt the warmth of him, solid and real and alive. "Yes," she said, "we will." Behind them, the children had finished their soup and were arguing about something. Wilhelm wanted to play pirates again. Karl wanted to draw pictures. Greta wanted everyone to be quiet so she could watch the fire. Normal family things, the kind of things that happen every day, in every home, all over the world. Helena smiled, turned away from the window, went to settle the argument, to get the children ready for bed, to do all the ordinary tasks that make up an ordinary life. The storm was over. Tomorrow would come, and they would face it together, just like they always had. Your blankets are probably getting heavier now. Your eyes might be starting to close. That's okay. That's good, actually. Let yourself drift a little. Think about Helena standing at that window, looking at the stars. Think about Friedrich beside her, battered but unbroken. Think about those 3 children, safe and warm and completely unaware of how close they'd come to losing everything. Think about how ordinary it all was in the end, how the biggest storms in our lives eventually become stories we tell, how the worst nights eventually become mornings. The Müller family didn't know it yet, but they'd live long lives in that city. Friedrich would work at the garment factory for another 20 years before his damaged feet finally forced him to retire. Helena would see all 3 of her children grow up, get married, have children of their own. She'd hold her grandchildren in the same arms that had held Wilhelm and Karl and Greta during those terrible 3 days. The chairs they burned became a family legend, something the children would tell their own children and their children's children. The night Grandma burned the furniture, the night Papa walked through a blizzard to get home, the night they learned what it really meant to survive. Some stories get bigger as they're passed down, some get smaller. But the best ones stay exactly the same size because they're true, and true stories don't need embellishment. This is one of those stories. Alright, that's section 5. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Let me tell you about Minnie Freeman. She was 19 years old in January of 1888, a school teacher in Myra Valley, Nebraska. Young for the job, but that was common on the prairie. They needed teachers, and they couldn't be picky about age. If you could read and write and keep a classroom under control, you were qualified. Minnie's school was a sod building, walls made of prairie grass and dirt packed tight, a single room with a coal stove in the corner and desks for 13 children. She walked there every morning from a farmhouse about a mile away where she boarded with a local family. On the morning of January 12th, she made that walk in pleasant weather. The sun was shining, the air was almost warm. The children arrived in good spirits, ready to learn their letters and numbers. By noon, everything changed. The storm came fast, faster than anything Minnie had ever seen. 1 minute, clear skies. The next, a wall of black and white roaring across the prairie like a living thing. The wind hit the schoolhouse like a fist. The door flew off its hinges. Snow poured in, driven horizontal by gusts that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Minnie grabbed the door, tried to force it back into place. The wind ripped it from her hands and sent it spinning into the white. Gone. Just gone. The children were screaming. Some were crying. The youngest, a girl of 5, had crawled under a desk and wouldn't come out. Minnie looked at them, looked at the storm, and felt a cold clarity settle over her. They couldn't stay here. The schoolhouse was too flimsy. Already the roof was groaning, shaking, threatening to tear away. If they stayed, they'd freeze, or the building would collapse on top of them, or both. The farmhouse was a mile away. In normal weather, a 20-minute walk? In this? She didn't know, but she knew staying wasn't an option. "Everyone get your coats," she said. Her voice came out steady, calmer than she felt. "We're leaving." "We can't go out there," one of the older boys protested. He was 12, almost as tall as Minnie, and scared out of his mind. "We can't see anything." "I know the way," Minnie said. "I walk it every day. I can find it blind." She hoped that was true. She had to believe it was true. The children bundled up, coats, scarves, mittens, not nearly enough for what waited outside, but it would have to do. Minnie gathered them by the door, counted heads. 13, all present. "Hold hands," she said. "Don't let go. No matter what happens, don't let go of the person next to you." She took the hand of the child closest to her, felt small fingers wrap around hers, squeezing tight. Ready? Nobody was ready, but they nodded anyway. Minnie stepped out into the storm. The cold hit her like a physical blow. She couldn't breathe for a moment, couldn't think. The snow was everywhere, in her eyes, her mouth, her lungs. The wind screamed so loud she couldn't hear the children behind her, but she could feel them, feel the chain of hands stretching back, feel the weight of 13 lives connected to her through nothing but grip and trust. She picked a direction, the direction she thought was right, and she started walking. 1 step, 2, 3. The snow was up to her knees already. Every step was a fight. She couldn't see more than a few feet in front of her face, and even that was just swirling white. No landmarks, no reference points, just snow and wind and cold. She kept walking. Behind her, the children stumbled and fell and got back up. She felt the chain tug and jerk as they struggled through the drifts, heard crying, barely audible over the wind, kept walking. 10 minutes passed. 20. She had no idea how far they'd gone or how far they had left to go. The farmhouse could be right in front of her. It could be miles away. She could have been walking in circles this whole time. Don't think about that. Just keep walking. Her feet were numb. Her hands were numb. Her face felt like it was being sandblasted by tiny shards of ice. Every breath hurt. Keep walking. And then, out of the white, a shape, dark and solid and real. The farmhouse. Minnie almost collapsed with relief. She pulled the children forward, found the door, wrenched it open. They tumbled inside, all 13 of them, gasping and crying and alive. The farm family wrapped them in blankets, fed them hot soup, counted heads again and again, unable to believe everyone had made it. Minnie sat by the fire and shook. Not from cold, from the release of tension that had been holding her together for the past hour, from the sudden understanding of what she'd done and what could have happened if she'd been wrong. She'd gambled 13 lives on her sense of direction, and she'd won. And the next day, when the storm finally broke, people started calling her a hero. Newspapers picked up the story. Songwriters wrote ballads about her. She received marriage proposals from men she'd never met, dozens of them, all wanting to marry Nebraska's fearless maid. Minnie didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a scared 19-year-old who'd done what needed to be done because there was no one else to do it. "I just walked," she told the reporters. "I've never felt such a wind. It blew the snow so hard that the flakes stung your face like arrows. All you could see ahead of you was a blinding, blowing sheet of snow." She never sought fame, never wanted the attention. She married a businessman named Edgar Penny, had children of her own, lived a quiet life far from the prairie. But she never forgot that walk through the storm, never forgot the feel of those small hands in hers, the weight of those 13 lives depending on her next step. Some moments define us, not because we choose them, but because they choose us. Minnie Freeman didn't wake up that morning planning to become a legend. She woke up planning to teach arithmetic and spelling to a bunch of farm kids. The storm had other plans. Back in New York, the city was slowly healing. The snow piles that had seemed permanent were shrinking day by day. Men with shovels gave way to men with carts, hauling the dirty grey slush to the rivers, where it could melt into the water. The streets reappeared. The trains started running again. Life found its rhythm. Friedrich went back to work at the garment factory. His feet still ached, and he walked with a slight limp that would never fully go away. But he could work. He could provide. That was what mattered. Helena started rebuilding the apartment. A chair here, a stool there, second-hand furniture from street vendors haggled down to prices they could almost afford. By spring, the place looked almost normal again. Different, but normal. The children stopped talking about the storm after a few weeks. Children do that. They process things faster than adults, file the scary parts away somewhere deep, and move on. Wilhelm went back to school. Carl went back to being Carl. Greta went back to watching fires. But Helena noticed changes, small things. Wilhelm was more protective of his siblings now, always counting heads, always making sure everyone was accounted for. Karl had started hoarding food, tucking bits of bread into his pockets, just in case. And Greta, who used to sleep through anything, now woke at the slightest sound. The storm had left marks on all of them, invisible marks, but marks nonetheless. The city was changing too, not just healing, but changing. People were angry about the deaths that could have been prevented, angry about the trains that had stranded thousands, angry about the telegraph lines that had snapped, leaving everyone blind and deaf and cut off from the world. Newspapers ran editorials demanding answers. Why hadn't there been warnings? Why were the elevated trains so vulnerable? Why were all the city's vital systems strung up on poles like decorations, exposed to every storm that came through? Someone needed to fix this. Someone needed to make sure it never happened again. The answers would take years to implement, but they started that spring. In offices and city halls and engineering firms across the northeast, men with drafting tables and slide rules, figuring out how to bury the telegraph lines underground, how to build a train system that couldn't be stopped by weather, how to create a warning network that would actually warn people. The blizzard of 1888 didn't just kill people and destroy property, it killed complacency. It destroyed the illusion that modern cities were immune to nature's worst, and in its place it planted seeds of infrastructure, seeds of planning, seeds of the modern world we live in now. The subway system that runs under Manhattan today, it exists because of that storm, because people got trapped on elevated trains and said, never again, because someone finally listened. The underground wires that power your phone, your internet, your electricity, they exist because of that storm, because the above ground ones came down and people realized there had to be a better way. Even weather forecasting changed. The Weather Bureau started taking its job more seriously after the blizzard, investing in better equipment, better training, better communication. The forecast that failed to predict the storm became a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when you get it wrong. All of that started in the weeks and months after March 1888, in the grief and the anger and the determination to do better. Progress doesn't come from comfort. It comes from disaster, from looking at the wreckage and saying, this can't happen again. The Muller family didn't know any of this. They were too busy surviving, too busy rebuilding, too busy living their ordinary lives, but they were part of it anyway, part of the story that would eventually lead to a safer, more resilient city. That's how history works. The big changes happen in boardrooms and legislatures, but they start in tenement kitchens, in the decisions of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, in the stubborn refusal to give up, even when giving up would be so much easier. Helena burned her chairs, Minnie walked through the storm, Friedrich climbed down from a frozen train and walked 2 miles through waist-deep snow to get home. None of them were trying to change the world. They were just trying to survive. But survival, it turns out, is how the world gets changed. Spring came slowly that year. The snow lingered in shaded corners and north-facing alleys long past when it should have melted. People joked that the blizzard was still hanging around, refusing to admit defeat. But gradually, stubbornly, the warmth returned. Buds appeared on the few trees that dotted the Lower East Side. Children started playing outside again. The smell of horse manure and street vendors and life returned to the air. Helena planted flowers in a window box, geraniums, red and bright and completely impractical. They wouldn't survive the next winter. They wouldn't feed anyone. They served no purpose except to be beautiful. Friedrich asked her about them one evening, curious. "Because I wanted something alive," she said. "Something that wasn't about surviving. Something that was just nice." He understood. After weeks of rationing and calculating and making do, after burning every stick of wood in the apartment just to stay warm, the idea of something purely decorative felt almost revolutionary, a small rebellion against the memory of scarcity. The children loved the flowers. They checked on them every morning, measuring how much they'd grown, arguing about whose turn it was to water them. Such a small thing, such a normal thing. That's what recovery looks like in the end. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, just ordinary people doing ordinary things one day at a time until ordinary feels normal again. The Mullers never forgot the storm. How could they? But they learned to live with it, to carry it as part of their story rather than the whole story, to look back on those 3 days and say, yes, that happened, and we survived it, and here we are. Your eyelids are getting heavy now, aren't they? That's okay, that's the point. Let the story settle into you like snow settling on a quiet street. Let the images blur a little at the edges. Helena at her window, Friedrich limping home through the drifts. Minnie Freeman walking blind through the blizzard with 13 children holding on to each other for dear life. These are real people, real stories, things that actually happened over 100 years ago to families not so different from yours. They made it through, and when you wake up tomorrow, you'll make it through whatever's waiting for you too. That's what their story teaches us. That the storms pass, that the sun comes up, that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary things when they have to be, and that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is just keep going. One step at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time, just like Minnie walking through the snow, just like Friedrich climbing those stairs, just like Helena burning the furniture to keep her children warm. You don't have to be fearless, you just have to be stubborn and human, and willing to hold on to the people you love. The rest takes care of itself. The newspapers kept writing about the blizzard for months afterward. Stories of survival, stories of loss, stories of the heroes who emerged from the white and the villains who profited from the chaos. One story that got told again and again was the ice bridge. When the East River froze during the storm, some brave or foolish souls decided to walk across Manhattan to Brooklyn on foot over ice that might hold or might not. For a few hours, it worked. People crossed, laughing and nervous, feeling like they'd beaten the storm at its own game. Then the tide changed. The ice cracked. Nearly 100 people got stranded on floating chunks, drifting in the freezing water, screaming for help. They were rescued, eventually. Boats went out, ropes were thrown. Everyone made it back alive, though some just barely. It became one of those stories people told with a shake of the head. Can you believe they walked on the ice? Can you believe they made it? New York was full of stories like that. Stories of luck and timing and the thin line between tragedy and triumph. The man who decided to walk home instead of waiting for a train and froze 4 blocks from his door. The woman who stayed in her office overnight and lived. The child who wandered away from home during the storm and somehow ended up at a police station 3 miles away, too young to explain how she'd gotten there. Everyone had a story. Everyone had been touched somehow by those 3 days, and everyone carried those stories forward into the spring and the summer and the years beyond, telling them at dinner tables and in taverns and at family reunions, passing them down to children who would pass them down to their own children. That's how we remember. That's how we honour the people who lived through things we can barely imagine, by telling their stories, by keeping them alive. All right. That's section 6. Let me know when you're ready for the next part. Summer in New York, 1888. The heat came down on the city like a blanket, thick and heavy and inescapable. People who'd spent March praying for warmth now spent July praying for cold. That's how it goes. You forget one misery the moment the next one arrives, but some things hadn't been forgotten. In an office on Lower Broadway, a group of engineers sat around a table covered in blueprints. The drawings showed tunnels, deep tunnels, running under the streets of Manhattan, wide enough for train cars and ventilation shafts and all the machinery needed to move thousands of people underground. A subway system. The idea wasn't new. London had one already, had for decades, but New York had always resisted. Too expensive, too complicated, too much disruption to the streets above. The elevated trains worked fine most of the time. Why spend millions on something buried in the dirt? March had answered that question. March had answered it 400 times over, once for every person who'd frozen while the elevated trains sat useless in the snow. "We can't be held hostage by the weather," one of the engineers said. He was a young man, barely 30, with ink stains on his fingers and circles under his eyes. He'd been working on these plans for months. The trains have to run, rain or shine, snow or heat. The city depends on them. The others nodded. They'd all been there during the storm. They'd all seen what happened when transportation stopped, the stranded workers, the empty shelves, the bodies in the drifts. Never again. That was the phrase on everyone's lips. Never again. The subway wouldn't be finished for years, decades actually. The first line wouldn't open until 1904, 16 years after the blizzard that inspired it. But it started here, in this room, with these men and their blueprints and their stubborn refusal to accept the way things had always been done. That's how change works. Slow, frustrating, full of arguments and setbacks and moments when it seems like nothing will ever get better. And then one day you look up and there's a subway beneath your feet, a whole network of them, running everywhere, stopping for nothing. And you forget that it used to be different. You forget that people once got stranded on frozen trains just because it snowed. History has a short memory. But that's okay. The important thing isn't remembering who built the tunnels. The important thing is that the tunnels got built. Meanwhile, in Washington, the Weather Bureau was having its own reckoning. The men who ran the weather service had been embarrassed by the blizzard. Humiliated, really. They'd predicted rain for March 11th, maybe some light snow by evening, nothing to worry about. They'd been catastrophically wrong. The storm had come out of nowhere, as far as they could tell. Their instruments, their observations, their carefully developed theories had all failed, and people had died because of it. Now they were trying to figure out why. The problem, they discovered, was communication, or rather the lack of it. Weather stations existed across the country, but they couldn't talk to each other fast enough. By the time reports reached Washington from the Atlantic coast, the weather had already changed. The storm was already on top of them. What they needed was speed, real-time information flowing from station to station, coast to coast, faster than the weather itself could move. Telephones helped. Telegraph lines helped more once they got them back up and running. But the real change was in attitude. The Weather Bureau stopped treating forecasting as an art and started treating it as a science. They invested in better instruments, better training, better protocols for getting the word out when something big was coming. It took years. Decades. The perfect forecast remained elusive, probably always would, but inch by inch, prediction by prediction, they got better. The surprise storms became less surprising. The warnings came earlier. The death tolls dropped. Your great-grandparents might have heard about a blizzard the morning it arrived if they were lucky. You hear about it a week in advance, with hourly updates and radar maps and talking heads on television explaining exactly when to stock up on milk and bread. That's progress. Slow, invisible, easy to take for granted. But progress nonetheless. Helena wouldn't have recognized any of this. She was busy that summer, too busy to think about engineering projects or weather bureaus. The children needed feeding, the apartment needed cleaning. Friedrich's feet still bothered him, and she'd taken on extra mending work to cover the cost of the salve he needed every night. Life, in other words. Ordinary, exhausting, endless life. But sometimes, late at night, after the children were asleep and Friedrich was snoring softly beside her, she'd lie awake and think about those 3 days, about the cold and the fear and the moment when she'd picked up that chair and known she was going to have to destroy it. She'd been so scared, so completely, paralyzingly scared. Not of dying, exactly. More of failing, of making the wrong choice and watching her children pay for it. But she'd made choices anyway, burned the chairs, invited the O'Briens in, kept the fire going through the longest nights of her life, and here she was, still alive, still standing, still holding her family together with nothing but stubbornness and love. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that had always been enough. The summer passed, fall came, then winter again. This winter was milder, cold but manageable. Snow fell, but not like before, nothing like before. The children played in it, made snowmen, threw snowballs at each other until their mittens were soaked through. Helena watched from the window, her heart doing a little jump every time a gust of wind kicked up. But the wind died down. The sun came out, the children came inside, laughing and red-cheeked, demanding hot cocoa. Just a normal winter, just a normal day. Friedrich came up behind her, put his hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" She nodded. "Just watching." "They're fine." "I know." But she kept watching anyway. Some fears don't go away. They just get quieter. Across the prairie, Anna Olsen was having a similar experience. She was 14 now, growing up fast the way farm children do. Her father had remarried in the fall, a widow from the next county over with 2 children of her own. The house was louder now, more crowded, more alive. Anna didn't mind. She'd spent too long being the adult in the family, trying to fill a space that wasn't hers to fill. Having a stepmother took some of the weight off her shoulders. She could be a kid again, at least some of the time, but she still woke up at night when the wind blew hard. Still felt her heart race when the sky turned that particular shade of grey. Still counted heads, automatically, every time a storm rolled through. Her younger siblings didn't seem affected. Kids are resilient that way, but Anna remembered everything. The cold in the schoolhouse, the smell of burning books, the sound of Miss Jensen's voice, calm and steady, telling them they were going to be okay. Miss Jensen had moved away after the winter, got a job at a bigger school in Lincoln, somewhere with brick walls and central heating and students who'd never had to burn their desks to stay warm. Anna understood. She'd have left too if she could, but she couldn't. The farm needed her, her family needed her, and maybe, just maybe, she needed to stay, to prove to herself that the prairie couldn't scare her away. Some nights, when the wind was calm and the stars were bright, she'd walk out to the edge of the wheat field and just stand there, breathing, listening, feeling the land under her feet, solid and real and permanent. This was home, for better or worse, through blizzards and droughts and whatever else the sky decided to throw at them. This was home. She wasn't going anywhere. The years that followed were kind to some, cruel to others. The prairie filled up with more settlers, more farms, more little towns, with schools and churches and general stores. The railroad pushed further west, bringing supplies and mail and newspapers full of news from cities most folks would never see. The blizzard of '88 became a measuring stick. People talked about it the way sailors talk about bad storms at sea, a way of establishing credentials, a way of saying, I was there, I survived it, I know what the worst looks like. New storms came and went. Some were bad. None were as bad as that one. The children's blizzard, they called it now, because of all the kids who'd been caught at school when it hit. The name stuck. It's still what they call it today. In New York, the city kept growing. More immigrants arrived every day, pouring off the boats at Ellis Island, looking for work and a better life. They packed into tenements like the one where the Mullers lived, families stacked on top of families, sharing walls and floors and the sounds of each other's lives. Friedrich trained some of the new arrivals at the garment factory, showed them how to work the machines, how to keep their fingers clear of the needles, how to pace themselves so they didn't burn out before the end of their 12-hour shift. He never talked about the blizzard at work, never mentioned the frozen train or the long walk home or the way his feet still ached when the weather turned cold. That was personal. That was family. But sometimes, when a new worker complained about the conditions, about the heat or the noise or the endless monotony, Friedrich would just look at them, not unkindly, just a look that said, "You don't know what hard is. You don't know what survival means." He never said it out loud, didn't need to. The look was enough. Helena's geraniums survived the summer, died in the fall, and came back the next spring. She'd learned to bring them inside before the first frost, to keep them dormant in a dark corner of the apartment until the warmth returned. It became a ritual, a small victory she could count on every year, life coming back, colour returning to the grey. The children grew. Wilhelm shot up like a weed, all elbows and awkward angles. By 12, he was nearly as tall as his father. Karl stayed small but got clever, always figuring out faster ways to do things, always asking questions the teachers couldn't answer. And Greta, quiet Greta, turned out to have a voice like a bell. She sang in the church choir every Sunday, her voice rising above the others, clear and pure and somehow sad. They were good kids, all three of them. They'd carry the memory of those 3 days for the rest of their lives, even if they didn't talk about it much, even if it faded into the background of all the other memories that came after. That's how trauma works. It doesn't disappear. It just gets crowded out by everything else, by school and work and love and loss and all the ordinary experiences that make up an ordinary life. The storm was always there, underneath, a foundation they'd built everything else on top of. Some foundations are made of joy, some are made of pain, most are made of both. The Muller Foundation was strong, strong enough to hold whatever came next, and things did come. Good things and bad things and everything in between. That's life. That's always been life. But they faced it together, just like they'd faced the storm. That's what families do. That's what humans do. We hold on to each other and we keep walking. The engineers kept working on their subway plans, year after year, revision after revision, arguing about routes and depths and ventilation systems. Politics got in the way, money got in the way. People who owned property along the proposed routes complained about property values and construction noise and the general inconvenience of progress. But the plans moved forward, slowly, stubbornly, inevitably. Ground was broken in 1900. 4 years of digging and blasting and hauling dirt out of the earth, bucket by bucket, load by load. Men died in the tunnels, cave-ins, accidents, the usual toll that progress demands. And then, in 1904, the first train ran. Underground, below the streets, safe from snow and ice and everything the sky could throw at it. Friedrich was there for the opening. He rode the first train, packed in with thousands of other New Yorkers, all of them marvelling at this impossible thing. A train beneath the earth, a city under the city. He thought about that frozen night on the elevated tracks. Thought about the hours of standing in the cold, waiting for help that wouldn't come. Thought about climbing down that makeshift rope ladder into chest-deep snow. Never again. The train hummed along, smooth and warm and utterly indifferent to the weather above. Friedrich smiled. For the first time in 16 years, he felt like the storm had truly ended. Helena wasn't with him. Someone had to stay with the children, but he told her about it that night. Described every detail, tried to put into words what it felt like to be part of something so big. "It's the future," he said, "right there under our feet. The future." She nodded, not entirely understanding, but happy to see him happy. That was enough. "Your breathing is probably slower now, your body heavier. That's good. That's exactly right. Let yourself sink into the mattress. Feel how soft it is, how warm. Feel the weight of the blankets, holding you down, keeping you safe. You're not on a frozen prairie. You're not in a tenement with the fire dying and the cold creeping in. You're here in your bed with heat pumping through the walls and food in the kitchen and a phone in your pocket that can tell you exactly what the weather will be tomorrow. All of that exists because of people like Helena, like Friedrich, like Minnie Freeman and Anna Olsen and the engineers bent over their blueprints in that office on Lower Broadway. They didn't know they were building the future. They thought they were just surviving the present. But survival is how the future gets built. One stubborn choice at a time. One burned chair at a time. One step through the snow at a time. You're part of that chain now. Connected to everyone who came before, everyone who refused to give up, everyone who kept walking when walking seemed impossible. Sleep is coming. Let it come. There's more story to tell, but it can wait. The good parts always can. All right, that's section 7. Let me know when you're ready for the final part. Years passed. They do that. Friedrich's hair went grey, then white. His limp got worse, then better, then worse again. He retired from the garment factory in 1912, 24 years after the storm. His feet had finally had enough. Helena threw him a party. Nothing fancy, just the family, some neighbours, a cake she'd baked herself. Friedrich sat in a chair by the window, the same window Helena had looked out of all those years ago, and watched his grandchildren play on the floor. Grandchildren. 3 of them by then, with more on the way. Wilhelm had married a girl from the neighbourhood, a second-generation German like himself. Karl had surprised everyone by falling in love with an Irish girl, daughter of immigrants who'd come over during the famine. Greta was still single, still singing, still watching fires with that quiet intensity she'd had since childhood. "Grandpa," one of the little ones said, climbing into Friedrich's lap, "tell us a story." Friedrich looked at Helena. She smiled, nodded. "Go ahead." "Did I ever tell you about the big snow?" The children shook their heads. They'd heard it before, of course, many times, but they wanted to hear it again. That's how family stories work. The telling matters as much as the tale. "It was March," Friedrich began. 1888. Your grandmother and I were young then. Your father wasn't much older than you are now. He told them about the train, about the cold that seeped into your bones and wouldn't leave, about climbing down that rope into the snow, not knowing if he'd make it home. Helena listened from the kitchen, hands busy with dishes, heart full of something she couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe, or gratitude, or just the strange sweetness of hearing your own story told back to you, shaped by someone else's memory. The children listened with wide eyes. They'd never known cold like that, never known fear like that. They lived in a world with subways and telephones and weather reports on the radio. The idea of being trapped, truly trapped, with no way to know what was coming next, was as foreign to them as fairy tales. Good. That was good. That was the whole point. Friedrich finished the story the way he always did, with the walk through the snow, with climbing the stairs to find his family alive, with Helena's face when she opened the door. "And then what happened?" the youngest one asked. "Then we lived," Friedrich said simply. "We just kept living." Helena dried her hands and came to stand beside him, put her hand on his shoulder, felt the bones beneath the skin, sharper now than they used to be. They were both getting old. It happened so gradually you almost didn't notice, and then one day you looked in the mirror and wondered where the time had gone. "Time for bed," she told the grandchildren. "Say goodnight to Grandpa." They protested the way children do, but eventually they went. Kisses and hugs and promises to tell more stories tomorrow. The apartment grew quiet. Just Friedrich and Helena, alone with the evening and each other. "Do you think about it much?" she asked. "The storm?" Friedrich considered the question. He'd been considering it for 24 years. "Or sometimes," he said. "Not as much as I used to. It's strange. Something that big, that terrible. You'd think it would stay sharp forever, but it fades. The edges get soft. I still dream about it sometimes. Me too." They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, the city hummed with its usual evening sounds. Horses and automobiles and people heading home from work. So different from 1888, and yet somehow the same. People had always needed to get home. People would always need to get home. "I'm glad you made it," Helena said quietly. "That night, I'm glad you came back." "I couldn't not come back. You were here. The children were here. Everything that mattered was here." She leaned against him the way she had 1,000 times before, felt his arm go around her, familiar and warm. "We did okay," she said, "didn't we? We did okay." And they had. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. They'd raised 3 children into decent adults. They'd kept a roof over their heads and food on the table. They'd loved each other through arguments and hardships and the slow erosion of time. That's all anyone can ask for, really. A life that adds up to something. A story worth telling. The Mullers had that. They'd earned it one day at a time, starting with those 3 impossible days in March. Somewhere in the city, Mrs. O'Brien was having a similar conversation with her own grandchildren. The baby she'd carried through that storm, little Margaret, was grown now with children of her own. She'd never remembered those 3 days, of course. Too young, but she'd heard the story so many times it felt like a memory anyway. "Your grandmother saved us," Mrs. O'Brien would say, nodding toward Helena's memory, "invited us in when she didn't have to, shared everything she had. That's what good people do." Margaret passed that story down too, to her children, her grandchildren, the generations that came after. The Irish family and the German family bound together by 3 days of cold and fear and kindness. Some debts never get repaid, some gifts never get forgotten. Helena died first in 1922. A stroke, quick and merciful. She went to sleep one night and simply didn't wake up. Friedrich found her in the morning, peaceful, her face relaxed in a way it hadn't been in years. He lived another 3 years after that. Quieter years. He spent most of his time with the grandchildren, telling stories, watching them grow. He'd become the old man in the chair by the window, the keeper of family history, the one who remembered things nobody else could remember. When he died, they buried him next to Helena in a small cemetery in Brooklyn. The whole family came, all 3 children, now middle-aged themselves, all the grandchildren, some with children of their own. A crowd of descendants standing in the cold, saying goodbye to a man who'd walked through a blizzard to get home to them. The headstone was simple. Friedrich Müller, Helena Müller, the dates. Nothing about the storm, nothing about the chairs she'd burned or the train he'd escaped. Those stories lived on in other ways, in the memories passed down from generation to generation, in the way the family gathered every March, without quite knowing why, to share a meal and be together. Some legacies are carved in stone. the best ones are carried in hearts. Out on the prairie, Anna Olsen grew old too. She never left the farm. Never wanted to, really, despite everything. She married a man from the next county, had 4 children of her own, watched the wheat grow and fail and grow again through decades of seasons. The schoolhouse where she'd spent those terrible days was torn down eventually. Too old, too fragile, too full of memories nobody wanted to keep. They built a new school in town, brick and mortar, with a furnace in the basement and plenty of coal to feed it. Anna's children went there, her grandchildren too. None of them ever had to burn books to stay warm. None of them ever had to huddle together on a classroom floor praying for morning. Progress, slow and imperfect, but real. Miss Jensen, the teacher who'd kept them all alive, wrote to Anna once. Years later, when they were both grown women with families of their own. A short letter, just a few lines, asking how she was, asking if she remembered. Anna wrote back, of course she remembered. How could she forget? They exchanged letters for years after that. Christmas cards, birth announcements, the small updates that pass between people bound by something they can never fully explain. They'd shared 3 days together, teacher and student, huddled in a freezing schoolhouse while the world tried to kill them. That kind of thing doesn't go away. It becomes part of you, woven into the fabric of who you are. When Miss Jensen died in 1941, Anna was one of the few people from those days still alive. She sat down that evening and wrote out the story one more time. All of it. The cold, the fear, the burning desks, the long wait for dawn. She wanted her grandchildren to have it. Wanted them to know what their grandmother had lived through back when she was just a scared little girl on the prairie. This is your history, she wrote at the end. This is where you come from. Remember it. The letter got passed down through the family, copied and recopied, shared at reunions, read aloud to children who'd never seen a blizzard and couldn't quite imagine what it meant to be cold, really cold, cold enough to die. That's how stories survive, not in books or monuments, but in the hearts of the people who carry them forward, in the telling and retelling generation after generation until the names get fuzzy but the truth remains. We survived. We held on to each other. We made it through. The 20th century rolled on. Wars came and went. The prairie filled up with towns and roads and power lines. New York grew taller and louder and more crowded than anyone in 1888 could have imagined. The blizzard faded into history. Just another old story, one of thousands taught in schools and forgotten by graduation. The people who'd lived through it died off one by one, taking their memories with them. But something remained in the infrastructure of the city, in the tunnels beneath the streets, in the warning systems that flash across your phone before every storm, in the simple fact that you can turn on a faucet and get hot water, flip a switch and get light, call someone on the other side of the world and hear their voice in seconds. All of that was built by people who knew what it meant to go without, who remembered the cold and the dark and the helplessness and swore their children would never have to feel the same. That's the gift they gave us, not just survival, but the tools to survive better, easier, safer. Every time you check the weather on your phone, you're using something that started in the ashes of 1888. Every time you ride a subway through a snowstorm, you're benefiting from decisions made by people who froze on elevated trains and said, never again, the past isn't gone, it's everywhere, built into everything, invisible but essential. Anna told her story sometimes when people asked. The storm, the cold, Miss Jensen's calm voice, the long wait for dawn. She told it plainly, without drama, the way you tell a story you've told 100 times before. We survived, she'd say at the end. That's all, we just survived. As if survival was a small thing, as if getting through the worst and coming out the other side was nothing special. But it was special. It's always special. Every person who makes it through a hard night, every family that holds together when everything is falling apart, every ordinary human being who chooses to keep going when giving up would be so much easier. That's the story. That's always been the story. Not heroes with capes and superpowers, just people. Scared, cold, uncertain people doing the best they can with what they have. And somehow, most of the time, that's enough. Your eyes are heavy now, really heavy, and that's okay. Let them close. Let the story settle into you like snow settling on a quiet field, soft and white and peaceful. Think about Helena at her window, watching the stars come out after 3 days of grey. Think about Friedrich climbing those stairs, heart pounding, hoping against hope. Think about Minnie Freeman walking blind through the blizzard with 13 children holding onto each other for dear life. Think about Anna, older now, standing at the edge of her wheat field as the sun goes down. The same land that tried to kill her all those years ago. The same sky that turned black and white and murderous. She's still here, still standing, still breathing. The storms pass. They always pass. And what's left behind is just life. Ordinary, precious, improbable life. You're part of that now, part of the long chain of people who survived